Manny Tinney. But sure enough, during the midst of my speaking and seeking to find a mockery, he fixed it. He did a little glitch, a little change. Wyatt is getting his buttons down. Wyatt is learning to be a producer, director, candlestick maker. Wyatt is learning to be everything that I had always hoped he could be when he had given all of his time and energy and his fortitude to Lowe's. But now he's become my guy, my producer. And so as I walked right here and got prepared for another Monday night edition, it was exciting to see the growth that my son has been on, how far he's matured, and how far he's prepared to build this podcast into an empire, a juggernaut, heretofore unseen by any other human being up until now. You'd think that would be enough, and it'd be time to hit the old theme song and get the ball rolling. And it should be, and it would be, but I have to wait just a moment. Oh, there he is. Wyatt had to come back. He had soiled himself. He still isn't out of corrective pants. I'm sorry, folks. That's a little too much information, but if you're here with Brad Stine Has Issues, you need to know the dark underbelly of what I have to suffer with in order to give you first-class entertainment. That always starts with a beautiful little uplifting theme song that sounds just a little bit like this.
Okay, so theme song is not playing. Let me toy with some buttons and see what I can do.
Now, as I said, folks, every dang time I think that we're ready to do a podcast at the highest level, this is what my son delivers. Shall we try again, son?
I'm currently trying again.
I see. Okay. Well, looks like we don't have a theme song this time, and that's okay.
Yeah, and the stream is telling me it does not like the current connection we have at all.
Okay. Well, should have seen that coming. Didn't. It's $10 of Doc off of his pay next month. So, hey, save me a little bit of money, and you didn't have to listen to the theme song. Ladies and gentlemen, it's me, God's comic, Brad Stine. And it is Brad Stine Has Issues, Monday night, 7 p.m., where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. You're not going to believe it, but guess who showed up? Why, Tim James came right up on board and said, howdy, Brad. Howdy, Tim James. White, can you imagine Tim showing up right off the bat? I never saw that coming, did you?
No, because Nick Fest came first.
No, Nick was nowhere to be found.
Yes,
then
he
we
was.
have Gil Gamble. Hey, y'all, from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. She always lets me know. Louis Leon. Hey, Brad and Wyatt. And friends, he's always screaming at us, Wyatt, every single time. If you could see him in his comments, I think you would understand that this man is in constant capital letters. Is there a reason for that, son?
Caps lock's on. He just doesn't know how to turn it off.
I don't know.
Or he's perpetually screaming.
He's perpetually screaming. Well, you never know. You know who's up here real quick, though? Danny Herring. Good evening, Brad and White. You know where Danny lives?
Canada.
No,
I know there was exactly one person who lives in Canada, and I keep forgetting who it is.
It's not Rebecca Daly Dwyer, I can promise you that. She's from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. She says Hawaii to Wyatt also, and we're also getting a little bit of weird echo. I'm sorry, folks. It went away. I don't know, folks. I can't fix my son.
It's actually the mic that's cut. We don't know why, but for some reason my mic is echoey.
Hey, from Iowa, USA, it's Scott Maley. Never heard of him. Marsha Pointer-Reed, hello from Indiana. Karen Boyd, hey, Brad and Wyatt all. She's got her little yellow hands. You think she has two hands or just one yellow hand that's redundant?
Maybe like one hand with like two sets of fingers on it.
Like a Siamese hand?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Rusty Rodriguez, listening from New Jersey. Poor guys. Hope you haven't been shot at yet.
Found the button.
Seriously?
Yeah, yeah. Don't tell me who turned the volume all the way down on the board, but somebody did.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Guys.
We have the theme song. What's there to complain about?
You know what? There's a lot of people that are coming on for the first time, just treading lightly, wondering if this is worthy of their time.
Yeah,
and they
so,
haven't heard my theme song. So please, son, crank it and let them hear it from the get-go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's God's Comic Brad Stine, and Brad Stine has issues with a song that goes like this. If I went to the professional hiring committee that gives you access to anybody you're looking to buy or sell or rent or lease, you're like a union or something of some kind, and I beg them, here's my criteria. I need somebody that is constantly going to mess up either my theme song, my echo, my microphone, my lighting, my... what else did you screw up, son?
Oh, I'm sure I can think of other things.
You can. That's my point. Nobody perfects imperfection like you. Let's see who else is out there. Gina Sizemore. Hey, Brad. James Voigt. Time for Brad and Meal. Brad and Meal. The poor guy's eating meals, son. Do you think it's because he lives in, what, West Virginia? And he's a coal miner. Just got back. He just says he's so beat. His muscles are so just been so hard. He's coughing up coal dust. He's eating meals, son. What do you think?
No, it's 2023. Nobody does cold anymore. He was clearly out on the field watering the wind farm.
Oh, there you go. Angie Brown's here. Hey, Brad. Jim Brano. Cheers, Brad and White. Looking forward to a great show. Jim, that's your first mistake. Never look forward to a great show. Have you been here for the last 3 minutes? Don't look forward to a great show. Look for tragedy. Look for funny videos where fat people fall over and little kids get knocked down. Look for problems where people fall through sewer holes. Wyatt, let them know why they call it Brad Stine Has Issues.
Because if we didn't have constant tech problems, it would just be Brad Stine Has, and that just doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Jennifer Carter's here. Good evening from Utah. Nick Crest comes in way down. Here come the issues. No kidding. Let's see. We've got Desi Wilhelm. The issues have begun. See, they've become to get used to it, son. It's almost like their fix. It's almost like their heroin fix. They don't want to watch a podcast that's perfectly articulate and locked down. Everybody's podcast is that way. Except mine.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, apparently Facebook is still already stopping notifying people about it, so at least we're doing that part right.
Typical Brad Stine show. That's what Louis Allen said. And they're laughing. They're mocking me, son, in my own podcast. Pete Shadlowski watching from...
Look, you have to ask yourself, are they laughing at you or are they laughing with you? And upon realizing it's at you, you should feel ashamed.
Yes, they're with me laughing at me, son.
I'm laughing with them laughing at you.
Hey, Barbara Mick Duvall. Hey, Brad and Wyatt. Gianna Sizemore. Sorry I'm late. Crafting and time got away from me. Yeah. We're on the same time, Gene. Every dang Monday. Seriously, you're crafting? There's plenty of time for crafting. My son, he knits. In between trying to push the proper button, he's always macrame.
It's not knitting, it's crocheting. Get it right.
That's it. Peter Laird, hey, from Buffalo, New York. Aaron Dent, hello. Hey, Buffalo, did Niagara Falls freeze? Marcia Pointer Reed, get the issues out of the way early. Yeah, don't you wish? Forrest Bainey's here, son. Who's got the coolest name on the podcast as a guest?
Nick Crest.
Well, his is cool, but is it...
Well, Saint Nick, that's...
Saint Nick, but Force Bainey?
I don't know. Kind of reminds me too much of Star Wars, and that series is kind of not done well recently.
Yeah. Okay,
to put it nicely.
Just trying to pick up Kimberly from Northup. Hello from Virginia. Gail Gamble. I've got a friend from Scotland who listens to you every now and again. Well, I'd rather they listen to me every again than every now. Don't you, son?
Okay, like, I don't know if you're trying to be clever or what, because I have no idea what you mean by that.
I'll tell you who does. Diana Strasberg, Meechin Salter. Hey, Brad, how you doing? I'm doing okay. Califlora is here, Christopher Page. Oh, Karen Boyd finally showed up. If you want to know more about God's comics. See, she's always taking care of me, though.
Also, I think we need to point out to the audience that one of the reasons why everything is terrible now is because we recently renovated the audio mixing. Yeah. So everything's in a new place. We moved a bunch of wires and hopefully connected them back properly. But, you know, that's sort of the problem with doing this stuff. You never quite know if it's ever going to be the same again.
You never know. And here's the thing, guys. We got to figure out that when my mic hits yours, so you have to mute it, unfortunately, every time. But here's the thing. You know, when you come on Stine Has Issues, what you're hoping for, other than, of course, the inevitable train wreck, is you're wondering how will it evolve. And it is evolving. As you can see, the lighting has been fairly consistent. That we're getting this audio a lot better. We're on Spotify now. You can now go find 2 episodes that I've had in the last 2 years, because we're learning to load them on little by little, piece by piece. And if you think about it, some of the older episodes that we had have got to be absolutely horrible.
Honestly, we should have a segment, either next week or a soon one, where we just react to one of our earlier recordings of this, just to, you know, reminisce on the fact that we're at least not that bad anymore.
Yeah, it could be. Did you just say a soon one?
Look, I'm trying to make the audio not suck horribly, and I'm also trying to be funny. And clearly, I'm only doing good at one of those 2 things, and I'll let the audience decide which one.
Yeah. You know what Marsha Pointer Reed says, and this is just a little beautiful thing she's throwing to you. I like the music playing randomly.
Well, exactly. It builds character. It makes us unique. Okay. Anyone can have the theme song play at the beginning. A true masterpiece plays right in the middle.
You know, Gail Gamble said, we're finally in the 80s here. My squirrels are now in their pre-release cages.
I'm not even going to touch that one. I have nothing funny to add to that. That's already the perfect comment.
Okay, don't you think? Good help is hard to find, says Hugh Waldron. No, good help with my genetics, impossible to find. And I got to tell you something. There was a time when I had a lot of pride in speaking how my son issued from my loins. But now I realize that somehow he got a genetic defect. It must have come from his mother. Wyatt, do you think it came from your mom?
My inability to English properly? Or my ability to accidentally press the mute button mid-sentence.
Yeah, I know. Deanna Miller said, yet another show I like that if Facebook no longer notifies me. I'm not surprised in the least. Yeah, is that who you're referencing, son? That wasn't getting...
Yeah, that's who I was referencing. I'm not sure if it's just a notifications thing or Facebook is really starting to be like, hey, they're doing too well.
Well, when you start getting good at this, and especially with the type of point of view...
or if you happen to be us.
Yeah, then they're going to be noticed and they're going to do some damage, and that's the way it is. Listen, one day I won't be here. Hopefully at that time we'll be on a platform by which you guys can follow and watch from then on, because we'll be in complete control. But right now I'm kind of at their mercy, son. I'm at their mercy. You know, I got to tell you something. Amelia Miyazawa Neculays. And yeah, that was easy to pronounce. Lives are just like in life. Rarely get what you expect, but sometimes you get even better. Not in our case, but yeah, it's a beautiful sentiment. Wyatt, anything to add?
I honestly didn't really catch much of what you said. It sounded like... Have you ever seen like a logo or something that and they try to be artsy with like the placement of the letters, and it just results in it being an incomprehensible mess of letters?
Yeah.
That was basically what that sentence sounded like to me.
I'll get you. Well, you know, Brian Edward David said greetings from the nursing home in Mountain View, California.
Well, we've peaked.
We have got to the pinnacle of what we were shooting for.
It's all downhill from here, folks.
Yeah,
get ready.
You know, Angie Brown said, I sometimes get the notifications, but not always. But others have said they got it.
I like this comment from Karen Boyd. And the loin portion of the program has begun.
I would have said commenced. I think that would have been a better phrase. And secondly, and I don't know how to take this any further, son. I really don't, because you've been on this podcast for quite some time. I don't know how many times I have to tell you. Her name is not Karen. It's Karen.
Oh. To be fair, I'm not good at pronouncing things. I press buttons, and that's basically my entire career here.
What's wrong with your pronunciation?
It no good.
Why be it not?
I no good at. I no pay attention.
Why do people say that they think you're from England?
I think it's the fact that I don't really enunciate the ending ofs on words. Don't make me say things like that. Now that you know my weakness, please do not exploit it.
So, would it be fair to say ours are your kryptonite?
Yeah, I'd say this. Who's the next comment?
Boom! Taking them down to Chinatown. Listen, you had an expander for your mouth to make them wider, and you did have a speech delay and a speech impediment, and you've overcome it.
Yeah,
Your R's are still troubling you. But you're 26, son. I don't expect miracles. I'm thinking by the time you're 48, 49, yes, I'll be long gone. Yes, I'll be with God Almighty. But you'll be able to say R like a normal person.
Are you saying the British aren't normal?
No.
Because I have a British accent, and you're saying that that's not normal. What do you really think?
I'll tell you what I really think. I want to know how many people out there, I just about knocked my glasses completely off my cool thing. I want to know how many people out there normally were warriors this week. Remember what I said to you guys last couple weeks, that we are trying to help the podcast be an inspiration to you to become actual warriors, government control, because you are the government. You control it. You are the people. You are the government. You can stand up as one. We are the militia of the mind. We will take back America if we become one. In no way shall we stop or be intimidated or be bullied. Now, I want you guys to understand that you get to tell people, and you can even write it down here today, what was your warrior moment this week? Where did you stand up for something when somebody wanted you to stand down? What interaction did you have with a neighbor, a friend, a child, a loved one, an unloved one, a hated one? What did you do? What did you say? What did you stand for? And I don't mean you're out being a jerk to people. I don't mean that you're out trying to find a little homeless waif that you can bring in and start your own podcast. You'll end up with Wyatt. That's what I got. But what I'm talking about is, did you stand for something this week? And especially because, it's funny, I was thinking about this. When it comes to this idea of identifying, now this is a magic word, and it's part of a concept I'm experiencing and looking with and exploring in my next comedy album. A couple people have seen it. Benjamin Gregory, I don't know if he's there. Is Benjamin here, Wyatt?
Not that I can see. And also, I may have figured out why the sound on the theme song is still a bit muted. So, earlier today, I was getting everything prepared. And when I was, going through all the audio, it was really loud. So I turned down the volume on the computer. And then promptly forgot to turn it back on before the show started. I fixed that now. You want to do the intro again just to see if it works?
Sure.
Fixed it.
Folks, I'm sorry.
I'm so not used to editing that volume. I didn't think to check it until I was just trying to think, why is it so muted? And it turns out it's because I apparently still stuck at pressing buttons.
2 years. Podcast growing little by little, bit by bit. I haven't paid myself one penny. Not one. I have used donations to help me buy stuff that's expensive so that the podcast comes together professionally. But I did start paying my son because he was here volunteering every dang week, trying to help his dad, who's an idiot, a techno idiot. and trying to run things the best he could. We had one little camera, and we're turning into something that's been exciting. We're getting great guests. It's all blowing up, and you guys are part of it. But I pay my son so he can be the producer, and I say, maybe go online, maybe do some YouTube, whatever you call it, tutorials, start learning equipment, start using this as a way to become a producer, so you'll have a skill set.
Okay, in my defense,
he constantly says things like, it's funny, I got here earlier, turned the sound down, and then, I did, and this is silly, it's just, it could have happened to anybody, being the producer of the podcast, I forgot to turn the frickin' volume back up, but I'm supposed to be kind because I'm a Christian.
Listen, hear me out. To be fair, it is really hard to find YouTube video tutorials on how to stop being an idiot.
Wyatt, clearly.
Trust me, I've looked, though nowhere.
Don't you get it? That's because the tutorial is supposed to be made by you.
Oh.
Clearly, you're the expert.
I am the expert at barely failing at stuff and then fixing it halfway through the podcast where it's definitely not noticeable or affecting anything at all.
By the way, if this is your first time on Stine Has Issues and you're in shock and awe, which means you're in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, England, let's see, Vermont, Massachusetts, Oregon, Washington, California. Let me think, where else? New Mexico, parts of, let's see, I would say, Manhattan, any deep blue state. You're in shock because of the way I'm treating my son. He can handle it because it's a joke, and I don't care if you don't like it because we joke with each other like humans because we're big boys with big boy pants.
I like this this comment by Nick Kress who just said, "Stop being an idiot for dummies."
Oh,
we need that. I need that book. If that book exists, please give it to me.
Yeah, Wyatt, right one. Listen, were you a warrior today? Wyatt, I want you to keep your eyes open for anybody that might mention that. But I want to tell you something about why this matters. The Militia of the Mind, if you're just joining up, is my way of aggregating normal human American citizens. And if you're an Australian and you're from Ireland or Canada, you can join us. I mean, I never want to leave you out. You're in your land that you've been given, doing the best you can to defend it if you can. But I'm in the U.S., so I just sort of focus on that because it's the one nation I have some potential to affect. And so I care about our Constitution, which said, and our Declaration of Independence, would say that the people are the government. We're it. We're the republic. So I want you guys to take advantage of those freedoms by acting them out in real time. We've seen with parents going to school board meetings and shutting down pornography and grooming and pedophilia. That's now part of our system in the United States and defended, of course, by leftists. Why? Because these are demonic ways of seeing the world, that there is no beauty, there is nothing sacred, there is nothing holy, there's nothing to conserve. Everything must be destroyed so we can recreate it in the image of the dunghill that they live in and love. I honest to goodness, can't understand what it would mean to be a leftist progressive because they constantly make ridiculous, horrific bills or mandates, or they let's defund police, and then the crime skyrockets, and innocent people are killed and raped and murdered, and they don't see it. It is so absurdly cult-like and religious dogmatism to not see the futility and the stupidity of how you live your life. I don't know how you live that way, and that's why I think it's demonic, and I'm not kidding, because I don't think people are that stupid. I don't think they can be on purpose. You have to self-delude yourself, and anybody that would self-delude themselves and doesn't care about truth, that's pretty demonic, because Satan is the father of lies. I thought you should know that. But the reason I want to encourage you guys little by little to see if we can create this militia of the mind, a movement that overtakes the U.S. and shows that we will not be bullied anymore. We're drawing lines in the sand against anybody that tries to tell us that we're hateful or intolerant or bigoted, because we stand for values, Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, which started the West, not just the United States. the West. We stand for values of family. We stand for sovereignty so you can defend your nation. We stand for rules and people becoming part of America and its traditions as opposed to making up your own rules. That's what we're conserving so that the system can exist. Do you make tweaks? Do you try to do simple things like make sure that all people are given access to equal opportunities? That's what we've been trying to do for a long time and did it very poorly for long, long times. Clearly, we all know that. Nobody hasn't known that because it was taught in schools and has constantly been taught in schools for, 100 years. So there's never an idea of we don't want to teach history. We do. If there's more history that is true and real, and we have access to it and it has been taught, bring it on. I'm not afraid of history as long as it's true. I'm not afraid of seeing that something can be changed because we used to believe this, but we've now seen by proof and data we were wrong. Okay, change. I'm conservative. When what I believe conflicts with what is true, I change my belief. That's the difference. That's what a true, logical, open-minded person is someone who simply wants truth over his feelings. Now, this is something we've talked about a million times, but much wiser people than me have come up with and have talked about how crucial it is that you get involved, that you connect to your community and you make changes and you give and you're philanthropic. America's always been the most philanthropic nation on earth. But you have to stand for the values, and that means you have to take a risk. You're going to be attacked. You're going to be because all the left has is attacks. It doesn't have truth. It doesn't have data. It doesn't have a track record of good. But nothing but evil has come from leftism. Nothing but evil. I mean, when Marxism has completely controlled the governmental system, we get Pol Pot's, we get Stalin's, we get Mao's, we get the greatest human rights abuses and deaths and rapes and murders and butcheries and tortures in human history. And they did it in 100 years. That's what progressives stand for. And they don't think they do. They're the good. They call themselves the good guys. I mean, it's like being a Holocaust denier, really. You're watching people being brutalized, that your ideas are happening, and you say, they're the bad people. It's victim shaming, literally as bad as it can get, because it's people who are suffering because of your idiotic, stupid, foolish laws and ideas and controls as governors and so forth in blue states. It just is. I'm just speaking truth. This is not me attacking left or the progressive, and I'm the conservative, and that's the simple pattern we've seen in every podcast like this. I don't do that. I'm simply stating facts about what's actually happening. So if you happen to have a logical acumen and actually care about truth, you can observe it and maybe draw some conclusions. I'm not telling anything to a conservative or a Christ follower that you don't already know. I'm not talking to the leftist who is so deeply involved in the cult they cannot think and will never come out of it. They're lost. Talking about the people that are still sort of struggling in the middle, trying to figure it out. And those are the people I hope come over to the Militia of the Mind and join us. We're going to do that, and we're going to start by creating this. My little version is through my ministry and my purpose, which is a missionary to America, by this podcast, by my live events that I have coming out. And so you guys can participate in that, and that's where I told you that we would have a way for us to gather together and create events and opportunities and things from this podcast that are going to go into the atmosphere, into America, and see if we can make some changes. And encourage people like you to stand up against tyranny and watch yourselves take back free speech and freedom. Free speech is crucial. If you can't speak freely, then you can't do anything freely. Speech is your conscience. But there's an interesting quote that I wanted to show you today. My son's got a picture of it. I'm going to show it to you. But it's from Eli Wiesel, I think is the way it's pronounced, and who, of course, was in a concentration camp and is very well known. He says this, and this is something I want for you to remember as the Militia of the Mind. Always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. So this is what I want you guys to keep in mind. Now, this is a guy that was in a concentration camp. Okay, so he knows what the evil can look like and how bad things can get if somebody isn't standing up for truth and for values and for virtue and for courage. And he was there. So I want you guys to be encouraged by people who have been in the worst case scenario, and what they learned was imperative to survive. Remember, the militia of the mind is going to be an aggregate of just like this little podcast where we're going to be able to talk to each other. We're going to be able to take little moments that you will take in your community, and you will gather your militia of the mind, and you will go into the school board meetings, and you will go in to a particular university, and you will start making people aware that you are not going to accept this in your community. You have that right as an American for community standards. And this is what you're going to have to do. It's going to be basically a militia of the mind, a civil war that's done through logic, reason, hope, love, truth, maturity, values, morality. This is the only shot we have. You will not be protected. Do not think voting in a Republican is going to save the day. It won't. They are in on it. I've told you this a million times. And the few that aren't do a lot of meetings, do a lot of hand waving, say all the things you want to hear, so you vote for them. But if nothing gets changed, it's all BS. Keep that in mind. And so I want to hold them accountable because they're the ones that said they would defend the Constitution. You're certainly not going to get protected by Democrats. They've given up on this nation. And I'm sure there's people out there who are people that just got so used to voting that way that they don't stop to consider your party has become lunatics. You need to move on. If you don't want to join the Republicans, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. They're traitorous cowards. Be a libertarian, right? Be an independent. But stand for something important. And this is what my hope is that this podcast becomes the genesis for us to have actual proactive ways of defending things in our nation. And I've got some ideas that I want to do, but part of that's going to be through you helping us build this coalition, because we're going to need funds, and the funds are going to go to things like I'm hoping that they'll be able to, first off, hire a full-time producer that actually knows where the buttons are. And it's hopefully will be my son, but he will have training then. We're going to get him help. But we're also going to be able to make these sketches, put out these sort of, I don't know, maybe a hybrid of TED Talk meets PragerU meets funny comedy, Babylon Bee. I mean, this is what I want to do. So you get to become, if you're interested in what I'm doing and think that I have a unique perspective as a Christian conservative patriot, and think that the things I say and the things I do and the guests that I'm getting and my passion for what I'm trying to do, and the live events that you can come out and see me perform as I'm building my next comedy album, is going to be what I introduced last week, the Mighty 10,000. And that, to me, is going to be the launch of what's going to allow this to have any impact whatsoever. The Mighty 10,000 will be the first 10,000. 10,000 is a bunch, but we need them. It's not much when in 3.5 million humans in the U.S. The Mighty 10,000 will donate $3 a month, $3. But that will allow us to turn this thing into something really interesting and hopefully effective. But a lot of people last week when I first mentioned it, and a lot of you have been donating and helping amazingly. And certainly you can give more if you choose, and it's grateful. But if you want to just be part of this Mighty 10,000, maybe I'll get 100,000 someday or 1 million. Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying. But the Mighty 10,000 will be those who've signed up. They will always be part of that group. Nobody else gets to ever be that. Once the 10,000 is reached, you can still jump in, but you won't be part of the Mighty 10. So that's what I'm offering you. And by the way, some people last week said, hey, how can I do it? Okay, we're getting ready. This is part of what I'm doing with the donations and things you guys have done for me, is I've got a guy that's trying to help build the subscription so that you guys will be able to safely do that. He's also helping me build ways for us to better utilize Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, better find a platform and Spotify to build this podcast. So I'm trying to do this thing piecemeal, piece by piece, and the Mighty 10,000 will help accelerate that. So if you are interested to be part of this unique, basically organic, from the ground up, podcast that most of the people here watching, or many of you, actually participated in. You can actually sign up to be one of the Mighty 10. Just go to my website, bradstine.com, go to contact, and it will have you fill out your email, your name, first, last name, and what city you're in. And what I'm going to ask you to do is simply this. If this interests you, and you have to pay anything now, you don't have to have a credit card, nothing. It's just saying I want in so we can start keeping your name aside. So the moment we launch, you guys will be contacted and you can jump in. But when you put your name down, put your email, and then it'll say your name, whatever it is, Joe, and then just dash Mighty 10,000. Just write that so you're telling us, I want to be in. I'm voting. I want to give you $3 a month. And that's going to, so $36 a year. But that will allow this thing to blow up into what I think it can become. So if you're interested, bradstine.com, contact, fill out your name, email, and put Mighty 10,000 next to it, and we will begin to aggregate you as a pre-voter, pre-donator, and we will allow you to be in line so that we can put you in there. So anyways, we have a special guest this day, this week, this month, this Monday. As you can see, oftentimes I like to say hi to you guys. Next week, I probably won't. Next week is going to be that time when I say thank you to you guys, and those who donate, and those who've helped, and those who participated in helping this to doing. Where I won't be talking to you guys, I'm going to be telling you about people that have done things to help. But I do want you guys to participate, because we'll have some wonderful, wonderful guests next week. I've got a bunch of people, believe it or not, I've already interviewed. So trust me when I say you got some really cool people coming. But tonight's going to be a special one, because I'm going to launch a series. I want to launch a series, and some of these guests and some of the special answers that they will have will be set aside and put for the Mighty 10,000. Only you'll have access to it. The rest, anybody can watch this for free. But there'll be special places for those of you who want extra content. And there'll even be some different things you can sign up for. And for those who want to sign up for specific things, I'll do shout-outs to family members for birthdays or whatever. This is all just part of me trying to find a way to give the best of my abilities and my skill set and the interests that people have in me back out to the community. So the special series I'm going to launch, though, is what I call Warrior Pastors series. You know, I went out into the marketplace during the cult of Corona, and I knew that there would be wide open places in South Dakota because Kristi Noem was the governor and she didn't shut down. I knew I'd have places in Idaho. I knew I'd have places in Iowa, North Dakota. I knew there would be places down south here that would be much more apt to be open and not fall for the nonsense. And so I realized that there were pastors, though, who were so deeply offended by being told that they were unessential, that they were so deeply offended that God Almighty's sanctuary would be closed down by a secular government, while strip clubs were given wide range, alcohol, Walmart, which is, of course, is China, and they said, this ain't happening on my watch. And I knew that they had to be highlighted because, folks, for the Mighty 10,000 to work and to help grow this into something huge, and God has to be involved with it if it's going to do it, to be part of the militia of the mind, you have to have people in certain positions of influence who stand firm when things were tough. When things were tough. It doesn't matter if you did it now. It doesn't matter what you did 6 months ago. What were you doing in 2020? That tells me who you were. And that's who I knew, what churches I was really excited about. Because as I've told you guys before, if a church wants me in now, I just say, what do you do for Corona? And I'll know the DNA of that church. Because I want to know people that believe in standing for truth no matter what happens. So the Warrior Pastor series will be starting with certain pastors that did amazing things during this Corona. They need to be lifted up. They need to be encouraged as courageous men of God when it was necessary to be a Joshua and a Caleb. So I'm going to bring on that first guest, and you're going to get to see the kind of behind the scenes of how pastors fought as warriors and how they were treated by their pastors, by other Christians, by their the community and the government, of course, who tried to find them, destroy them, cancel them, imprison them in America. This is the crap I will fight until I die. This is what I'm doing to do. We're going to launch that today. I did want to do a quick thing, though, to you and say something to you that I came across, and I thought it might be an excellent way to just give you a kind of an update. If you've never been a pastor, they have some concepts. Why don't you to lay in on this? That they have to grapple with that people don't think about if they weren't a pastor. Number one, they fight the balance between pleasing people and pleasing God every day. They're trying to please all the people, the milk drinkers, the meat eaters, but they're trying to serve God. So that's one thing they have to balance that you don't have to do if you're not a pastor. They hear more negative than positive feedback. Why are you always giving your pastor negative feedback?
Because it's the only way they're gonna learn.
Oh.
Like you can't constantly tell someone you're doing a great job when they're drawing on the walls or taking a hammer to something.
Well done, son.
Sometimes you gotta set your foot down and say, no, do it right.
Wow. I tried that on you, and you know what? Failed miserably.
Well, results may vary.
We say no sometimes because we love our sheep. So pastors have families. Sometimes they got to say, can't do that because my wife is about to leave me. My kids forgot they had a dad. So you got to give them some grace because they have to have some time. Our families feel the weight of our calling more than they will ever tell you. So these are kids who have to go to school and say, you're a PK, a preacher's kid. It ain't easy. Oh, your dad's a pastor. That's weird. And now it's getting worse and worse and worse because now, because of the persecution and the hate of Christians in the West, and your father's a pastor and you are living by these principles, what are you going to do? How do you handle that? How do you navigate that? Eating well, exercising well, and sleeping well is hard work for us because there's so much trying to help everybody else that they have a difficult time taking care of themselves. Why?
That just seems like wanting an excuse to not have to exercise.
Right.
Or eat. Right.
Well, for example, when you started getting huge, your girth, was it because you were considering being a pastor?
It had something to do with it, but it was mostly just my absolute visceral hatred towards anything healthy.
That's well said, son. Many of us are professional extroverts. Pastors have to do a lot of deep thinking and study. We're used to being alone and actually love it. We enjoy our time with people too, but we're often professional extroverts, relating to crowds and leading people out of a secondary set of gifts. So they're professional extroverts, but maybe they enjoy being by themselves. We know we could get paid better doing something else, but we don't want to. Wyatt, does that sound familiar?
We know we're being exploited by the system to pay us minimum wage, and we could do something about it, but that's effort. The store that with the exercise and the diet thing, that's just too much for us.
Spiritual warfare is a way of life. The devil hates all Christians. I used to say that there's no way he hates or targets pastors more, but the longer that I do this, the more I realize that the widespread repercussion from a leader who falls puts an automatic target on the pastor's back for the enemy to lob his arrows. Spiritual warfare, these people are fighting for you, praying for you. Do you think about that? Do you think your pastor's up to doing that? He is, unless he sucks at being a pastor. Wyatt, do you suck at being a pastor?
Well, that changes the answer then. That last part you added on, it changes it completely. Because now I'm going from a yes to a maybe, you know?
Well, maybe you'll be a pastor someday. We're always fighting our own sin too. Wyatt, are you always fighting your own sin too?
Yeah, it has a flair and I'm scared.
Oh. Takes us about 7 days to unplug for a meaningful and true vacation. It's hard for pastors to unplug. Wyatt, one thing I know about you is it's not hard for you to unplug. Matter of fact, you rarely can find the plug.
Yeah, honestly, I'm pretty sure that I don't even have an outlet. I just sort of sneak into the neighbor's house and take theirs.
Oh, drill a little hole in.
No, I just use their outlets like a normal person. Who do you think I am?
Wyatt, we all need an outlet now and again. You know that. It's hard for us to have friends. Most people assume we've got a lot of friends. Most of us don't. Think about it. Our church is our place of worship, our place of work, and our friend circle, not three different contexts, all the same one. The leadership role of pastor is not a hat that can easily be set aside in those contexts. That makes it difficult to have friends. We also struggle with people who treat us as a friend and not pastor. It's not impossible for us to have friends, but it takes effort. And sometimes our best friends are not in the churches where we serve. Wyatt, is it true that your best friend lives in Taiwan?
I was going to say more Hong Kong, but I get those two places mixed up sometimes. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's dual citizenship or something.
We work more than 1 day a week. That's right. The pastor's job is he can get called at 2 in the morning. Hey, my mom just died. Can you come over here and pray for her? Do the funeral. Do the marriage. Can you come over here and pray for the sick? These guys have a stinking hard job. The difference between them and Wyatt, they accomplish their mission.
And also, there are less buttons involved with being a pastor. I think, actually, how many buttons does a pastor have to press in an average week?
Let me make something very sure. I promise you, if a pastor's doing his job, he's pressing a lot of buttons, and people are being victims of such stuff.
More than me?
Wyatt, I wish I could have one big fat giant button for you, and that one at least you wouldn't miss. Our greatest joy is when our sheep get it. They like it when people get salvation. They like it when people get what they're trying to teach them, and we are rewarded by being invited into a full spectrum of life's big moments. And they are. They get to be part of the weddings, the funerals, and anything else. Calling is, their mission is to be part of your life intimately. And they aren't rewarded enough. They aren't. I got to tell you something. I could not be a pastor. Couldn't. I would be there 2 weeks, and I would either have shot half my congregation or hung myself. That's the deal. I don't have the temperament it takes, and you need a very specific temperament to be a pastor. But what happens when you are a pastor who's trying to serve God, trying to serve the people, trying to be the best citizen, trying to be the best neighbor, and the government comes by and says, you know what, I just want to let you know that your church is unessential, and that if you open it up, you're murdering people. You can't be open. You can't have faith that maybe, just maybe, God wants this place open and let people decide. And we're going to find you, we're going to sue you, and we're going to mock you and ridicule you. And when you go to other pastors or other churches or other Christians to get some support, thinking we're all going to be in this together like in the lion's den, they're going to bail out on you. Well, that's what happened. I watched churches crumble because they shut down thinking they're being good neighbors. Church never recovered, and it shouldn't. God weeded them out. He doesn't have cowards as his warrior leadership. He has to have people that are willing and able to do what is true. Remember what I always told you guys. When it comes to these governmental edicts, and we are supposed to be good citizens. We're supposed to be great and honor our citizens and our neighbors. This is all Christian concepts, right? Augustine talking about the city of God, the city of man, and how there is a hierarchy and that we're supposed to honor that. And God sets up the hierarchies to keep things in order. That's what war, by the way, is for in Just Warfare, is to maintain peace and order. That's why it has to exist. We don't want it to, but it has to. So that's what is going on. Well, what happens when order gets disrupted and they come to the pastor and say, hey, you got to shut down. You're going to harm people if they show up. Well, here's the deal. Is it true? Is what they're telling me true? Is this really going to kill, millions and millions of people? No, it was a lie. Was anything, and we're seeing it more and more. Listen, I have nothing to say to a conservative out there or a believer, because we knew this for 2 years. They're just releasing the idea that maybe that probably did come from a lab, this virus. I've known that for 2 years. I've never doubted it. There are people in our country right now and around the world who for the first time are thinking, oh, maybe it did. We knew that from the beginning. But because you get your marching orders from propaganda, there is no media, there is no press anymore. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. You have to create things like this. Mighty 10,000, by the way, can help this overcome some of those things and let truth be told when lies are being spewed. But this is where we're at, and I want to lift up and lionize pastors that I've met, that I know of, or I've been referred to, who did hard things. I want to say, how did they navigate it? What was it like? This is something you might even be able to use if you're in ministry, or if you're just a Christian in the workforce or in regular life, or if you're just a conservative, just somebody who wants to navigate difficulties when people come against you. That's what this series is for. And the first pastor I've decided to launch this Warrior Pastor series is someone I've known for many years, because he happens to be my pastor. But before that, he was a music manager of Christian bands. He was then a pastor of college age at a church I attended. So I've known him for many years, and then he started a church. His church is blowing up in Franklin, Tennessee, and he really, really is an expert at seeing how the culture works, seeing the difference between postmodernism, relativism, wokeism, leftism, and Christianity, and how these two religions collide and how we need to navigate that, try to work through it, how to fight through it, and stand up for these truths and these the reality of where we're at now in the United States and around the world. Frankly, we are at war with demons, and it is hardcore, and you have to prepare yourself. So I wanted to launch the Pastor Warrior, the Warrior Pastor series with my pastor, let you hear his story and hear how he got through this thing, and then you guys can begin to say, maybe see, are there pastors like that around my area that I need to be part of? Because you're going to have to choose warriors, because it's going to happen again and again and again until they destroy us or we win. So if you want to be part of the Mighty 10,000 and pre-sell, so to speak, pre-donate, no money, no cards, it's only $3 a month. Just get on Brad Stine Has Issues and give us your, it'll say contact, email, name, address, or name, last name, say Mighty 10,000, so we'll know that's who you are, and your city. And we will be coming to your town. I will be performing. We are going to build this into something that I hope is so robust that it helps inspire others to change their community for the good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy series number 1, episode number 1 of a very unique series, Warrior Pastors with Pastor Darren Tyler. Buckle up. So, as you know, on Brad Stine Has Issues, we always seek to get the most interesting and intriguing guests we can, because there's so much that needs to be said in America right now. And clearly, I don't have much to say. I'm just a comic. There's not a heck of a lot that I can add to the table. But if I bring in people that are smarter than me, which isn't hard, actually, I go to the bread line and just grab people, and they're better than me. But the key to this next guest is a launching of a particular series that I want to add to Brad Stine Has Issues, because obviously we have a lot of eclectic guests and unique people from all different walks of life and mindsets, philosophies, ideologies. But I wanted to create what I call the Warrior Pastor series. I'll probably put on one a month. And when I say warrior pastor, which frightens people, especially people that want to keep Christians from having any influence in culture, what I mean by that is men and leaders who are Christians unapologetically, who believe in the original intent of this nation. Make sure that you understand, this is not about worshiping the United States. I do not. I worship Christ only. But I'm grateful for the greatest nation in human history, and I'm going to fight for it because it's a territory I was given, whether you like it or not. You're responsible for where you were born and where you're raised. It's yours, so do what you must with it. And so, that being said, we're at a tipping point in America. We're at a place where Christianity and the Judeo-Christian ethic that created Western culture is being diminished, demeaned, ridiculed, slandered. It's because of a false religion that now is at the foundation of American milieu, which is basically Marxism, which is hidden under different monikers, whether it's called political correctness, whether it's called CRT, whether it's called tolerance. It's all a smokescreen for a atheistic, postmodern, relativistic vision of the world that despises everything that God stands for, and especially Jesus, because Jesus is God. And we're going to talk about that, but we're going to do it with this first particular man who I chose for two reasons. One, he's a friend, happens to be my pastor, but that's not why I brought him on. I happen to know him personally, but also watched during the Corona cult who was standing up for what was necessary in America for Christians, for people who believe in liberty, religious liberty, freedom, the ability to speak freely, the ability to be observant of what's really going on. The Christians that understood our purpose are the last truth tellers on earth. That's why we're here. So I wanted to bring this gentleman on. He's got a great life testimony, very unique history as to how he started in the Christian realm and how he ended up as a pastor. But more importantly, he is in fact a warrior, and we will get into that in just a moment. But first, let me, with pleasure, introduce my pastor, my friend, and the first of the series in the Warrior Pastor series, Darren Tyler, my brother.
Dude, thank you for having me, man. You're selling yourself short on the smart thing, by the way.
I don't know about that.
The thing about comedy, at least that I think anyway, is it apparently requires an enormous amount of intelligence, because the amount of people that don't find good comedy funny right now are people who can't hold two ideas in their head at the same time.
Right. Right.
And so you've got to have something out there, because you're making people laugh and you're making them mad.
Well, I mean, I think that there's no question that most comics are pretty smart. I don't know why. But I think for at least what comedians are, they don't take life for granted. They kind of observe it, and they're curious about it, and they don't just allow it to happen around them. They engage it and ask questions. Why do we do that? How come things are like this? How come people can get away with that? And I think that in that question, I've talked about this on the podcast. We are of a very historic of humans, in that we were the court jesters. We were the ones that were allowed to mock the king and not get our heads cut off.
Get away with it.
Somebody had to tell the monarchy that the peasants were as good as them. We're the ones that got away with that. Now, that wasn't easy to do, especially when monarchs could just say, you're dead, and that was that. But
yeah, that's way worse than Amateur Night at the Apollo.
Very worse. Yeah, there was not a hook, there was a guillotine. It was a whole different vibe. But and by the way, is he in frame good, Wyatt? And you can hear him good. You can see his face real good. All right. I want him to be comfortable,
like wiggly and jumpy. So
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because I don't want you to not be seen, because this is important. Well,
bring the microphone down a tiny bit.
Yeah, as long as it's picking it up good. So, and folks, you're watching the real thing. This is live, and this is what it looks like. Regular people figuring out the best. I'm not even wearing pants, but you wouldn't know. How would you know that?
This is Radio Free Stine, is what this is, man.
That's
this is
exactly
like the underground bunker.
Indeed. Well, let me tell you, before we get started, because you have a lot to say, and I'm very honored you show up, because I know we're friends, and so it's always a little odd when people know each other and then suddenly they're in this situation where they're acting like professionals, or they give the illusion they know what they're talking about. But I think that there is something that needs to be addressed. Number one, you're a pastor. Now, I'm a real fan of pastors, because I think it's an incredibly difficult job. I've been a Christian basically my whole life. I've watched different genres of denominations and phases of my faith come and go, into charisma and then into deep, conservatives. And I've found the whole thing, and it's the journey of a Christian trying to figure this thing out. It's hard. You're working it out with fear and trembling. But I do hold the office as sacrosanct, and so even though we're friends, I think once a guy becomes pastor, I feel like I owe them a certain amount of respect in that regard. Well, no, because I think God says it that way. He created a hierarchy of how things work and how we're supposed to see each other, just like the marriage. The man treats her, loves her as Christ loved the church. She's supposed to submit, these odd things that all feel weird to us or intrusive. And God says, I don't give a crap. This is the way the game works. And I made it up, and this is how we're going to do it. So let's start with that, because I see you almost hesitant. I don't know if it's out of humbleness or out of a disagreement, and that's fine.
It's probably both, but it's more that there's like so the world I grew up in, there was he was the man of God, and he had to have his armor bearer.
Yeah,
which is basically go get my dry cleaning and my linen pants.
Right.
You know.
So you came out in the charismatic. They all had those extra guys.
Yeah. Who are all these people?
Yeah. Right.
And I'm a pastor now, and I still don't know what they were doing, because I don't have that much stuff to do.
Right.
And when Paul, they were trying to worship him, and it says he tore his clothes, and so there's that edge of the ditch. But then there's the other edge, which is complete disrespect and complete. So somewhere in the middle is this job that I've been called to do, where there's definitely a role where I don't know that it. So respect is earned; it's not given.
Okay.
So there's a job for that. If I do it right, that I will hopefully have earned some respect. And the best way to earn respect is to be right a few times in a row.
Right.
And earn enough so that when you're wrong, that your bank account still has positive being correct versus incorrect. And so, which honestly is what, I mean, golly, the last 3 years, I think I definitely took some withdrawals from the trust account from our people. But, when I saw you guys, I remember the first Sunday, because I was just starting to notice from the secular world that the comedians were the ones that were starting to push it a little bit, saying, I don't know that this is...
Yeah.
And, of course, they were all being shut down immediately. So, anyway, when I saw you guys wander in, you and Desiree, I was like, it's a comedian. Of course it makes sense that, and I don't know, I didn't follow, so I don't know if any other comedians that come from a Christian worldview were following you in that, but...
I doubt it. I mean, I've always been, a unicorn because my comedy has always dealt with Christian worldview as which nobody else does.
Yeah.
I've always had this idea that I had a bigger responsibility than just being funny. I didn't call for that. I didn't ask for that. It's not what I would have chosen, frankly. It would have been easier just to be funny and make money.
Yeah. And by the way, that's... I don't even know if you know this, but like the first year that I remember you out on the circuit, you were doing festivals, and I was managing. I probably shouldn't say the names of the bands because
you should. You should know this. So you were a manager of Christian bands first.
Yeah, that was my journey.
Unless you don't feel comfortable, they were fairly well-known guys.
Yeah, they were. But what I was going to say is that I didn't want them following you on a festival. So,
I see.
You know what I mean? Because you'd get up there and just literally suck the. It was 2001, whatever. All I remember was you would get up there and just mop the floor for whatever your set was and walk off, and everybody's just cheering. And when you're a manager, you don't want your artist following that. It's like following.
No, I understand.
Toby Mac. So there was a band called Cutlass that I was managing, and I remember I think it was Atlanta Fest and maybe Creation, telling the promoter, "Hey, can my band go on before this guy Brad?" I hadn't even met you yet at this point. I think it was your put a helmet on phase.
Yeah,
but. It was like, I just remember thinking, and then I started reading about you and realizing, he came, no wonder, because he came the general market side.
Yeah,
you had to be funny.
You got to be funny
to survive that. You can't just get up there and they're going to be honest with you. So
he's doing his church comedy.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that there's genres of art, just like praise and worship.
Sure.
I mean, your average person, if you showed them praise and worship, they go, I don't even know what you're doing. What is this? It doesn't even fit a category in their mind of a pop music or whatever. And I know you're a music fan, so you don't think of the Beatles and U2 and then Hillsong. It's kind of a different thing.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. But it's for a particular group of people.
Yeah.
For a specific reason to supposedly prepare them for worshiping.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a one-of-a-kind style.
Yeah, there's no other genre on earth.
Yeah, right.
So, but yeah, I get that. And that, it was good to my family. I mean, that was my genre for a long time, was music that was made primarily for Christians and for edification, encouragement, and entertainment.
And there's nothing wrong with having that option. And that's why I said that about Christian comics. When I started, there weren't very many. And they kind of came out of the church flavor. Shonda Pierce, Mark Lowry, Ken Davis. So they were all wonderful comics.
Yeah.
But they had a very specific lane that they were that everybody was comfortable with, and I literally remember my journey. But when I felt as though God was bringing me out of clubs into churches, I thought kind of my goal was to just show that clean comedy could be just as funny. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And I suddenly started working in churches as an option from a club agency in California that was booking clean comedy, and they were putting them in churches. I'd never grew up in the church. I never saw a comic in a church my entire life. No. And it was in the 90s, and so I started doing that, and it's like, well, I know how to work for these people. They're my people. And I remember saying, I mean, it's a long story, and this whole thing is about you, not me, because
I'm sorry. I'm used to being the one doing the interview.
No, and I want it to be about you, but it's okay because it does apply to where we're going, and you'll see why in a minute. But I went to God, and I said, you know, isn't it better that I do clean comedy in nightclubs, because I don't need to sell clean comedy to Christians. They already bought it. Yeah. I want to sell it to people that didn't know this could be good. And God said to me, I didn't ask you where to go. I asked you, will you go? You said yes, so shut up and go. Yeah. And I believe that's what God is. I believe that God obviously is merciful, obviously is filled with grace, obviously is filled with forgiveness, or none of us could survive. But I also think that he has doesn't have a lot of time and tolerance for screwing around, because he calls you to something and he expects you to do it, and he expects you to be an adult about it, like be mature about it. I don't think that's expected of most Christians in America, and I think because of that, it's cost us influence and probably even our ability to see ourselves as being thought of with respect and dignity, because the church in America didn't expect anything from you. Yeah. Nothing. You don't owe Jesus anything. Just bow your head, close your eyes, raise your hand. Nobody's looking. Yeah. Because we don't want to embarrass you.
Yeah. Well, there's something happened in maybe the 80s in American church, and that was that the Sunday gathering began to be thought of by at least certain groups as a moment for evangelism on a Sunday. And so that's not a small it's not a small distinction, because it's a big change from what it used to be, which was the gathering of the church come together. But when that happened, it was given different names like seeker sensitive, because the idea was that anything we did on Sunday could not be remotely considered offensive because it might cost somebody quote unquote salvation.
Saddleback model, purpose-driven church thing, right? Wasn't that kind of that whole vibe of how do we make this accessible to the average person that doesn't go to church?
Yeah, and so there are two things that happen with that. One is the truth isn't always very commercially viable. That's something that we've seen, that just because it's true doesn't mean that it's valuable financially. And so the watering down happens. So you end up with believers who've been sitting in a gathering on a Sunday who walk away without really any sort of discipleship, or you know, and in many of those churches through small groups, that was the idea that they would eventually get discipleship. I think that it's probably by now we can all admit that never happened. And then
I think some of the seeker sensitive churches, was it Jack, the guy up in Chicago? I think he not too long ago said, I think I screwed up doing it this way. I think I've realized now this didn't pan out the way we thought it was going to.
Yeah, and look, the bands that I was working with in the early 2000s were the product of churches like that. So you would end up with young men, the decade before that, where you've got like Michael W. Smith, Stephen Curtis. They were, and remain, by the way, godly men who know the word and know. But this other generation didn't in so much. Like, and not to disparage Warren, but all you have to do is say this prayer. There's no cost to count. And so, does God absolutely so love the world? He sent his only son? Absolutely. And they hated me. They don't hate you yet.
Yeah.
But they hated me. And then he's going to say that in just a few more chapters. And now they're going to hate you. So if you're not...
And who wants to get somebody in your club?
Yeah.
By the way, when you get in here, everybody's going to isolate, and you're going to be a pariah, and you're like, what? What kind of club is this?
Right.
And then he's like, how about the truth? And it's going to weed out most of humanity. It's like, this doesn't make any sense.
And that's it. Like, if it's true, it's not whether it feels good, whether it's good. It's not whether I like the way that sounds. If it's true, then let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, I don't know. I feel like totalitarian states that I had been a missionary in and disappointed early on, because I thought, golly, this is really good news. I shared some good news. I thought everybody would be very excited. And that wasn't the response in those early days.
Before you go on, and I want you to stay right there, but I want to preface it because it was one of the questions I was going to get at anyways. So when I go to comedy now, and there's lots of churches that like me and love me. There's not everybody does because I'm dangerous, and that's okay. But I actually tell people now, I know who a church is now, and I ask one question. What do you do for Corona?
Yeah.
That answer tells me more about the pastor, the DNA of the church, their perspective of truth-telling, the perspective of how do they coordinate being part of a culture and a respect for a governmental hierarchy by which God created. And when do they say but?
Yeah.
What trumps all is the truth of Christ. That trumps it all.
100%.
And once you realize there's where your cost comes, because now you have to negotiate the government coming after you, or people saying you're not being a good neighbor. They always have great Christian monikers and Christianese, and we all know the proper ideas. And it's this lack of defining your terms that kills so many Christians, because anybody can say God loves everybody. Well, yeah, he does. He loves everybody. That doesn't matter. If you don't say but, what is love? Because we can talk the same words and still have different languages, because I'm defining love as there's no responsibility. I don't have to do any of that. Love just means God doesn't care, and he does. So let's start with that, because the series about warrior pastors is this, and this is going to be tricky for some of y'all watching, because I don't want you to get the impression that what I'm saying is if a pastor did it differently, or if he shut down for a year or whatever, that somehow he's a heretic, or somehow he doesn't hear from God, or somehow... Oh, I don't know that that's okay. Some are. Some were cowards and exposed the secular culture that obviously is more of an influence on them than their faith in Christ. There's no question that was exposed, but that's not unusual. That's happened throughout your own perspective, and then it had to be either righted or pushed aside. But let's start with that, because to me that is such a obvious existential observation of where we just were for the last 2 years. As a pastor, you are an important. The strip club is, and the bar is, but not you. And you have to now navigate this. How do I show neighborliness and God's love in Christ? And how do I say, not only am I essential, but I'm going to remove the doors and rip them off the hinges. Nobody tells me that this sanctuary isn't the single most essential thing during the most important time in people's life, who are in abject fear of what's going to the right now. No, we're wide open for those who want to come. You don't have to, but we're here. How do you navigate as a warrior pastor that clear challenge? Because I'm sure there were even pastors that probably came up against you when you thought they'd all be on your side.
Yeah, they did. And I have an enormous amount of empathy for pastors, especially in those first few months, because it was a weird time. And frankly, not everybody would want to, or maybe you should have even been staying up late at night reading a European epidemiologist, but that's just how we were bent. But the way that we navigated it was really simple. What is true? And then we're going to make the decision based on what was true. And
now, was the truth mainly about the actual ramifications of this virus and how dangerous, or did you also bring in constitutional First Amendment stuff, religious liberties ideas? I mean, did that even enter in, or was it mainly about just is my people going to start dying?
It was so it was a weird it was like if we had like the different pillars. I don't know that we really whiteboarded it out quite this clear, but there was certainly the question of the Constitution and could the government do that. We didn't focus at all.
May of 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first
YMCA
year.
never closed their kids' activities ever. They had no breakouts. There were no bodies piling up outside of YMCA's. So obviously, closing schools was something that eventually happened with the public schools. But when it came to that, there was no question that it wasn't a danger there. By May of 2020, it was really clear who was at most risk. They talk about it now like it's some brand new information that Anderson Cooper just figured out. That was already known and established, and so we made the decision. Actually, let me tell you the third thing was, and that was the question: are we actually an essential service?
Yeah,
like that was all we are. If we're not talking about constitutional, if we're not talking about the danger, and it's just are we an essential service? If all I'm doing is a sermon, and all we're doing is music, you can get that on YouTube and a TED Talk. But that wasn't all we were doing. You guys have been there. You know that we don't even pass an offering plate, which is hilariously controversial. We just have this idea that God loves a cheerful giver, but if you're giving them something to be cheerful about, then you don't even have to ask. And at that point, places like Nepal were locked down so tightly that people were literally starving in their own homes. In Uganda, there was no public transportation. People were left in the bush.
So they couldn't get to stores and get food and so forth.
And nobody
so
was
this one-size-fits-all solution was literally killing human beings.
Killing human beings. Yeah. And our gathering every Sunday, you've been there, we talk about the work that's happening. And in a live gathering, we are feeding one child for a day. So yeah, absolutely, it was about the money. And by the time we started regathering in May, and by the way, when I came back in May, this was not some path to church growth. Like, there was a moment where I thought, I might have just killed this church, but at least it's true. But we were 600 before. By May, it was like we were lucky if there were 200. But among those 200, we had one Sunday where $25,000 came in, and we were able to literally wire money and hire Sherpas to go into the Himalayan mountains and deliver food. So for us to gather, the question wasn't, did it risk lives? For us, the answer was, yeah, what lives are you willing to risk? You're going to tell the little girls in Africa that you need to be sexually assaulted just so that we could stay home and be safe? Absolutely. I'm not interested in that.
Right.
So our main thing was, are we essential? And thousands of children who don't get to go to school next month. There are thousands of rehabilitation at Place of Hope, 100%. We've had a waiting list for 2 years now because isolating is the worst thing you can do to an addict. And what AA...
Meanwhile, they left the bars wide open for people during the... It was like they wanted to kill them off or something. It was crazy.
My Apple Watch is going to tell me our heart rate's up in a minute. But that was infuriating. Like, we started welcoming AA groups into our church because churches weren't letting AA... But they could go to the bar up the road. And the amount of young men, old men, women that I know that relapsed because they were doing what they were told by the government.
Scared, isolated, lonely, depressed. What are you going to do? You're going to do your drugs. That's what I'm used to. That's how I get through this.
Yeah, because that's most addictions are about covering a pain. They're numbing something. And you can't, and all you're sitting alone is with your thoughts and your feelings. But I can go to the bar or the liquor store.
Yeah.
They were sliding, and that was... I never really... It's funny when you asked me to do this, I was thinking, a warrior pastor, I don't know, he might not have the right guy. He needs to get Jack Hibbs on the phone. But when I first started the pastor role, I didn't think that... I never thought of myself as a pastor, because most pastors I know are well, actually, first they're nice, but they're pretty reserved, and they've got real hearts for, compassion, and I'm none of that. But when you look at what a shepherd does, not a shepherd in America. Like I used to have a farm, I had sheep. And even with a fenced-in pasture, half of my job was just keeping them alive. Not just feeding them, but killing things that were trying to kill them, protecting them with things that could protect them from predators. And you look at the shepherds of the Bible, David, not the least of them, the reason he was able to kill Goliath with a sling was because he could.
Yeah.
There was a skill involved in, I'm not going out with a sling or a gun or anything to kill anybody, but there was a warrior component to what a shepherd was meant to do that you do see in the New Testament.
And there's an enemy.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do when you have an enemy? I mean, and this is part of what I guess I also want to explore with you, because as a pastor, you're responsible to understand these kind of situations in society, at least for who your flock is, because that's what you're responsible, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And you said something about, I do, because, you are going to Haiti and you are going to Africa, and you guys are literally taking families who make bricks in Pakistan as slaves today.
Yeah.
And buying them free. So that's a pastor's heart. But I'm the same way. I believe God called me to be a prophet to the church. So when I get this title, prophet. Well, obviously, Darren, you know me. I'm sitting there going, that's ridiculous. Because that title is supposed to be reserved for certain special human beings that were born under very special circumstances and given this unique. And we all knew from the big get-go, I'll bet he'll be a prophet. I'll bet he'll be. No, it's always guys that don't get to work. And so I think you undersell yourself. Of everybody that God uses for deep things, they always think they're the wrong guy for the job. And I think he looks for that guy, so he knows that you get out of the way of yourself, which isn't easy to do. Well, this brings me to another component of a warrior pastor in culture, because this is really what I'm battling in politics.
Yeah.
And a place of faith.
What happened with a lot of my friends who were pastors who didn't open they weren't heretics, they were just acquiescing, is they sort of viewed their role, and I say past tense because most of them have realized that wasn't the right path, was to not rock the boat. My job is just to teach the Bible. I had a friend that would tell me that. He's like, Darren, I'm not an instigator like you. I just am supposed to teach the Bible, and now he's not said that lately. But if that's the role of the pastor, I would say it's a role of the pastor. But the role of a pastor cannot be to answer a bunch of questions nobody's asking. In those days when the pastor says, and you're probably asking this, and I'd be, well, actually, that's not what I'm asking at all. What I'm asking, and what we're asking, are questions that are completely relevant to our lives. Like, what do I do when I'm in a world where my new co-employer, somebody I work with, who is now a man dressed as a woman, am I supposed to use the right pronoun? Like, because if we're not answering that question, somebody's going to answer it for them, and it's.
Or just bully them into submission, and there has to be a line in the sand.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for you, I say that sarcastically, you're up. It's your job, and the pastors that will watch this or will be shared with, to kind of decide. I believe this is a clarion call in America, Darren. If we don't, we're already. Who knows if we even can ever retrieve what it meant to be an American and the Judeo-Christian element of what was the foundation of this nation with the Pilgrims. But at minimum, pastors are going to have to stand up and say, we're not taking any more bullying, we're not shutting up, you can threaten us, you can do whatever, but this is the cost of discipleship, which we've never experienced in America, maybe to our chagrin. Maybe what we're doing is he's weeding us out and finding who the real warriors are, and off we go. Yeah. So how do we navigate this? Where does it become inappropriate or outside of your purview to engage politically as a pastor, and representing our faith, because our faith isn't Republican or Democrat.
Yeah.
So Christ, So where is that? How does one find that?
The one place that I don't go to that and ask for whether I should or shouldn't is the government. So the government tells me that I can't even talk on behalf of a candidate specifically because they'll take my tax ID number.
Which, by the way, is illegal, and they can't. It's never happened before.
Yeah.
So those who have fought against it.
Yeah. And if they did, come get it.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like that they don't get to be the ones. I'm not looking to them for what is true.
Right.
And if we've learned anything, whether it's the Kennedy assassination, whatever, like the government, trusting the government with truth is not a good trust. So what is true, and when it comes to being a pastor, that's not a political statement. That's a issue. And by the way, human rights from a Judeo-Christian, without Judeo-Christian background, we don't even have the things that we consider to be normal in our culture. They're not normal.
Right.
They came from Judeo-Christian values.
You mean the morality, the justice, the way that we consider how to treat each other.
The fact that all human life is valuable. Yeah. That is something you could say. Now, of course, the very pro-abortion would agree with all life is human valuable, but say that a baby in the mother's womb is not a human. But even if you put that aside, the idea that all human life is valuable, that can only come from a Judeo-Christian worldview. The Eastern specifically, that do not view all human life as valuable. Right. It's not a normal human inclination. Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens were to have their way, it's actually right to say that not all humans are equal, because it's survival of the fittest. Right, so those children in Africa should die. Now that's the logical conclusion.
They're being weeded out.
Yeah. Why would I spend my money on that if they're just weak? It's that's how I get to survive and they don't. Which we know. I say that out loud and it makes you want to cringe, but there's without going outside of secular humanism, without going outside of science, those are moral questions that have to come from somewhere, and they don't come from Allah, they don't come from Buddha, but from the God of the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus. That's where we know that human life. So back to your question, like how do we engage in it? We have to first disabuse. I have to disabuse myself of the notion that everybody's going to understand. That if I communicate clearly enough, that if I'm nice enough, that I can convince somebody. I got to disabuse myself of that notion. It doesn't mean I need to go out and be a jerk. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be quarrelsome, as Paul would say in 2 Timothy. But it does mean that I'm 100% going to speak up on behalf of political / principled issues that matter. Vote your conscience? No. Vote biblical values? Yes. Vote life. Paul in Romans, in Acts 21, was being arrested by a Roman legion, right? And they were getting ready to scourge him. Now he's already told himself, "I'm a Roman. I'm from Tarsus."
Yeah.
But at some point he has to speak up and say, "But this is my legal rights. You can't do this to me because I'm a Roman citizen." Right. And so he's saying, you're with the government, but I'm demanding my rights. And then those that would Romans 13 me, which I got a lot of Romans 13, respect the government, was written by the guy that was executed for not obeying the government. So clearly he did mean something by that, which was when the laws of the government are godly and are moral.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
That's what Martin Luther King was going by. He's like, an unjust law is no law at all. That was civil disobedience, and he was lambasted by pastors saying, dude, you're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to just acquiesce and give. And he said, it's unjust. This isn't what we stand for. So, but that's hard, Darren, because sometimes people aren't sure.
Yeah.
The stance you made over Corona and said, I'm going to open up because and I love that. You all did the work. It wasn't a trick. You were trying to make good decisions, and you were trying to make important decisions. And that's why I prefaced it with, look, I know some of you pastors, you shut down, you kept her shut down, and maybe now you regret it and realize, well, I won't do that again, and it's all right, we're all doing the best we can. But the key was, and all I could go by was, if it's a gray area, biblically, because some things we're not quite sure exactly, it's not just spelled out exactly what to do. It's almost like we're given a little bit of a freedom to vote your conscience, I guess. Unless it's specific,
Yeah.
God gives you kind of some rights to have disagreements and still be okay with it.
Yeah.
But there were two things that I really was utilizing. One was, if I am being persuaded or asked to change my behavior or my conscience or my obligation as a Christ follower, not if you're not. Mm-hmm. If you're not, let the government rule you. That's your daddy.
Yep.
Be whatever that is. If that's what you need,
yes,
and if we understood anything about America, it was the biggest thing that broke my heart about watching America during the Corona cult was the cowardice. The understanding of how many Americans not only didn't care about their liberties, but would be happy to give them away for the sake of just keep me well.
Yeah.
Just keep me well. How many masks do you need me to wear? How many vaccines do you need me to inject? How many neighbors do you need me to turn in? This is what we found was happening in our nation, the greatest, freest nation on earth, who thought we will never become the Nazi sympathizers. Yeah. Really? Yeah, you just did it.
Yeah, when I say I woke up in a world that I didn't know I was in, I'm used to in Asia, neighbors turning each other in because they were having a gathering in their home for Christianity. And by the way, the reason in Iran that it says that it's not safe, and in their words, Christianity isn't safe because it causes dissension, but I was used to that there. Here it was, it felt so foreign, I guess it's a proper word, it felt foreign, but I think the gift that it gave me was the realization that we are all the same Romans 1 fallen humans, whether you are in East Asia or East Nashville, and we all need the same Savior. That's why he didn't come to make good men better, because none of us are. He come to make dead men alive. And in those early days, but even for the next year, like it was. So I'll say this: right after, so I was in Israel in February and early March of 2020, and we were noticing, especially there were a lot of Asians there at any time. There's usually a lot of Asians. But there were certain Palestinian sites that they were like chasing Asians out. I vividly remember one guy, he was a Japanese guy. He's like trying to tell the guy, "I'm from Japan. I'm not from Korea." People that had corona that were from Korea, but so we're already seeing like, okay, something's different here.
Yeah.
And I came back to America, and I did. I spoke. Dave Ramsey's company's here in town. I did a Devo for his company on that Wednesday, which I don't remember, early March, and then like that Friday, the whole world shut down. And I had we had a meeting the following Monday night, I believe it was, with I used to meet once a month with a group of pastors. The reason I'm telling you that is that I would meet with a group of pastors. There was like 10 of us. I was by far the smallest church represented in this organization. I mean, it was just, and they're all great guys, and they all love the Lord. And most of the guys in that room, we don't meet together any longer, not because I don't want to, but they definitely were pushing against our reopening, pushing against some of the things that I was saying out loud, whether through social media or through our Sunday. At that point, we were on Zoom for a couple weeks, but it felt pretty lonely because it did feel gray. But I was naive enough to think, well, no, I don't have a gun to anybody's head. You don't have to come this Sunday if you don't want to. Right. Here's your live stream option, But in that era, especially, it was cloaked in virtue of if you stay home, you are saving lives. That was the shtick.
And you're being Jesus. They really added all this Jesus to. He's always the trump card when everybody wants to legitimize their point of view. Yeah. Well, Jesus would have taken the back. Heard a guy say that's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Jesus, who is like, he's blind, not anymore, no arms. Yes, you do. Yeah. He's dead. Come back to life. Yeah. Jesus, you take a vax? Oh yes, give me the vax. It's absurdity, but it's the manipulation of the greatest human of all time to get what you want and to control people. You've talked about Paul, and I've used this many times, that idea about are you allowed to beat a Roman citizen without a trial? And they go, no. And what he didn't do, well, let me show you what the Torah says. He didn't say that. Yeah. He didn't say, well, you know what, us Christian. He said, I appeal to Caesar. Mm-hmm. I'm a Roman citizen.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that was a clue. North Korea we wouldn't be having this conversation without being in a closet whispering to each other and with like a hidden, right?
Yeah.
But we're allowed to do that here.
Yeah.
So it was different. So if I'm given a First Amendment right in the United States of America in a religious liberty, which was the first liberty, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or forbidding the free exercise thereof, because that's your conscience. And it's the single most important freedom given to you, because your conscience can be atheist, can be Muslim, can be Christian, can be polytheist, whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
But you have that freedom. And so I want to leverage that because it's a freedom that's been given to me. So why wouldn't I be smart and logical? Christianity was the first logical religion. Come, let's reason together. Of course, I came from the Jewish Torah, but I'm just saying that that's why we mix the two.
Yeah.
So when you, as a pastor, confront totalitarianism, which is what you used earlier, I'd never seen America become totalitarian. That's a loaded, stinking word, brother, because that's
And I don't use it lightly.
Well, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when you're adding totalitarian in the United States, something has gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Because it's about the antithesis as it can get. So then we come into, historically, as a Christian pastor, you've got just war theory, Augustine. You've got the Black Robed Regiment, who were the revolutionary pastors who would say, let us speak of Jesus, and then he would remove his robes and grab his mouth. Where does that fit in a 2023? None of us want guns. None of us want to get a bunch of militia together and shoot each other. But where do Christianity and the ability to defend oneself by blood, where do we find that world?
Yeah, it's amazing how many people can be a pacifist in, academically speaking, until it's their own life or their own child or their own, that it's different. Because otherwise I can keep it hypothetical of what I would or wouldn't do. And as it relates to us, I mean, one of the very first mission guys that I ever met and financially supported was a guy named Sam Childers, who is known as the machine gun preacher. And I've always found it fascinating. I see Sam when I go to Uganda still. I'd been to Uganda. I'd seen what Joseph Kony and the Lord's Resistance Army was doing, and like, that is fascinating. It didn't even occur to me to do that. It didn't occur to him not to do that.
Well, explain that to me, because I have had a burden for the persecuted church for many years, and in Uganda, in Nigeria, for example, it's genocide. I mean, they're wiping our people out, and it's so horrific to watch little children and what's happened to the way they treat our people. And I see them as my people. These are Christians who are just like me. They got a wife, got some kids, thinking, can I just live my life? No, we're going to come in and rape your daughter and sell your life. What the Jews said in the Holocaust, anytime.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm more of a Sam Childers. Jesus had 12 disciples. One would rest his head on his chest. The other guy cut people's ears off. And I happen to come from the ear-cutting
the ear-cutting clan.
And so how do we... So explain to me. You don't have to apologize for your perspective-wise, theologically, historically. And if so, is that on the table? When does that become part of what we have to pursue as Christians?
When I asked Sam that question, he said, Darren, I don't know how to biblically frame it. I just know that if I'm wrong, I'm willing to take my chances standing before God. And it was a striking statement because what he's saying is, people that don't know, Kony was going into these villages and he was kidnapping children, and before he would leave, he would make the children kill their parents with blunt force. With a gun to the child's head, you have to club your mother to death. And then he would hype them up on meth, and they became his army. And Sam was saying, I'm willing to take my chances if I'm wrong with it. And as it relates to the work that we've done, say, in Asia, setting slaves free, we're actually right now in the process, I can't say the country, but there's a lot of Middle Eastern countries that literally right now there are sub-Saharan Africans that are in slavery that you could buy them from a block right now just like it was, the 1600s in the United States, 1700s. And so we are working right now through what systems that we have available to get them out. We've yet to need to pick up a weapon for that. But when it comes to in America, so far we have not needed that, and I think that for the most part, the Christians throughout history, whether it was the plague, the Civil War, the young men that were battling, but the Christians that's Christians. So we are not to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. Sometimes I feel like our job is we're just in the middle of cleaning up the mess of the Genesis 3 world. And, I know that I sleep with a weapon by my bed, but I'm a redneck white trash kid, so I've done that since I was a kid. And, I wouldn't hesitate if someone was trying to harm my family, to stop them from it. And I'm willing to take my chances before God if that turned out to be
And I
wrong.
think most Christians, frankly, probably would agree with that. I don't think anybody considers self-defense. I mean, that's historically in the Old Testament.
Well, yeah, they might say that, but they sure couldn't point to a New Testament passage for it.
Okay.
And so if they were to come to me and say, on the other hand, if you were to go proactive, how would you justify that in the New Testament? Well, you just agreed to one that wasn't in the New Testament either. So where is the line? And I don't know the answer other than Metaxas's book on Bonhoeffer. I read that when it very first came out. I didn't know who he was. I just found this book, and I neglected my family because I couldn't put it down, and it wasn't a small book. Like it was a lot of pages. Yeah. And I actually went back and reread it because I had a little bit of time in February or March of 2020. And Karl Barth, which Bonhoeffer used a lot, and I would say that I bet Bonhoeffer is in heaven. He participated in a plot to kill Hitler proactively, and I would bet that he's probably enjoying an eternal reward, just like Paul.
He believed that when he went to the gallows.
Yeah,
he said, "I'm just starting. My life's just getting in," and it's heartbreaking because we see ourselves as just regular people going, how did we get? And Darren, it's false perspective of Christianity because we're Americans.
Yeah.
We feel like this is an aberration, and most Christians go, no. When I signed up, that was the deal. Yeah. I just spent the afternoon, or this afternoon before I got with Eric Metaxas. So he's doing something at TBN, but I definitely went to. We're going to help get him at the church.
Yeah.
And you should know. You should probably go on his radio show. I could help you do that because I told him about you and about the idea of warrior pastors and so forth, because we have to have leaders who are believers, who are unapologetic and believe this is true. I've realized this, and it's been sad to me to a certain degree, but who cares? God uses who he needs to use to get his point. But the best apologist for that book being the Word of God, the standard for Western culture, the actual means by which humanity is dignified, and where the structure of how things are supposed to work, the rule book for life. The best apologist, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, has been a non-believer named Jordan Peterson.
Yes, at best, maybe.
Yeah. And I love what he said. I mean, he said, this, and I've said this before in my comedy, but. It's a unique book. It's not a book. 66 books, 40 different authors, 1,500 years. It's impossible. It's an impossible book. And the single most sourced sort of original book for all other Western books in human history, you need to know what that book is telling us.
Yeah.
So what is it about that book that we're missing in American churches?
Yeah. You know what? I was reading 2 Timothy that I had to open here today, but this morning, because it's Paul is in prison, so he's already asked for his rights. And according to their government, the right was, we're going to go to Rome, and there's going to be a trial there. And so 2 Timothy is the last writing that Paul made. It was the last book that he wrote. And he's telling this young pastor, everybody abandoned me. I've been all alone. It cost somebody to know Paul, because Paul, they hated Paul the same reason they hated Jesus. Jesus said in John 7 that they hated me because I am testimony of their evil deeds. Like the very fact that I'm here is a testimony of the evil deeds of the world. Mm-hmm. And so that's why they hated Jesus, and they hated Paul for the same reason, because by this time, it's AD 55, Caligula is doing orgies, and it's the same. They hated Paul for the same reason that we would be hated, which is that there's a morality, there is a right and a wrong, and so what we have to know is that in a culture with an enemy that is spiritual beyond us, they're going to hate you too. Mm-hmm. So if we could just get over that notion, that was the first notion I had to get over. I was used to being hated in Haiti or Africa or with the riots. I was used to being hated there. But I come home and I'm just another guy on the street. We're part of the American church. And so for the most part, if they're hating us right now, they're hating us. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when The Office, was made, and the language they were using just 10 years ago can't be used today. So either we fall in line or we don't. And the truth was the truth 10 years ago, the truth. So, but in a secular world, the truth changes, so you have to keep up with it. Yeah. And we have to know that the reason that we're hated. So if I say right now that a man can't have a baby, that is bizarrely considered a courageous thing to say. Yeah. That's not courageous. And if that's the news, if that's the bar for courage, it's so low that we don't have to really try hard for it. Yeah. But we're going to be hated for it, and we're going to suffer because of it. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is, because we have an enemy that doesn't want that truth out. There's an enemy that wants dominion over it. From the Genesis 3 moment, Genesis 2, the enemy was set about to kill the bloodline of Christ, because if he could prove God a liar, right? That's still true. To this day, he wants to destroy God. He wants to destroy you and I, and so we're going to suffer because of it. And we don't have to be jerks. I mean, he talks about don't be quarrelsome, but he does talk about be true.
Yes. Well, and I've even said before in my comedy, I said, you don't have to be a jerk because the truth is offensive enough.
And that's it, right? And I think what we've done, the disservice in our society, seeker sensitive churches or whatever, is that the idea that something might be offensive, there are things that are offensive, right? Mm-hmm. But there are some things that are just true, and so we can't conflate those all into one list. God's designed for marriage. One naturally born man and one naturally born woman is an offensive idea in our culture, but it's still true. And so we're going to suffer for those ideas. And what I love about what Paul did was he ends it with, but I'm pouring out my life as a drink offering. He's going to be executed. Whether he knows it or not, he's about to be executed. I've been to the place in Rome where they said it happened, where his head would have bounced across the floor. And what I love is that it's right next to where the Colosseum. And so the people that killed Paul, I just paid $5 to walk on their grave because their empire is long gone. Right. And the faith of Christ is still, 2,000 years later, we're still, Jesus is still on the earth. The Christianity is still thriving in the world.
Well, and what's interesting is it's thriving more so in these sort of more oppressed parts of the nation. And I do believe, in some odd way, some simple little template of what you did with your church. And I saw this nationally, by the way, because I was working. I would go find places I knew were open, like Idaho's and South Dakota. That wasn't Christy Nome.
Christy Nome for president,
And now Florida, thank God. But I noticed that many of the churches that did shut down, and they were trying. Some of them were just doing the best they could. Yeah. And in the first week or two, nobody cared. Yeah. First week or so, we got the Black Plague coming. It's some virus. We don't know if it was engineered genetically, so we don't know what. And we're like, you need a couple weeks. I get it. Yeah. We'll give you a couple weeks. Yeah. And that's when he said, "Oh, you are?" Yeah. And the game was on. And the enemy always will leverage your virtue and your morality to suddenly use it against you for you to even retain your dignity, because he's now controlling you. You are Obviously, it always goes faster than I want, but it's okay. I assume that God is in control and He's saying what needs to be said. But I want you to. I don't know why, Darren, but I get people that watch me from Australia, from South Africa, from Ireland.
I love that.
It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. Canada, and we talk about totalitarian. I feel so sorry for Canadians. I love Canada. I won't go back. I won't even touch it. I can't stand Trudeau. Now, I'm sure I kind of pray for him. I have to, but I can't stand what this guy is doing. But this is the world we live in, where people are going to make decisions based on their worldview. Yeah. And if it ain't Christian, it's going to control. Yeah. But let's just say as we get close to wrapping this up, I want you, since you're my first warrior pastor, I want you to kind of look to the people, and I'm going to be two sort of ending, and you can go as long as you want. I'm not under any time.
Don't ever tell a pastor that.
I know.
Never. And in closing. Yeah.
But I want you to do this. First, I want you to speak to pastors who either have felt alone because they are out somewhere in Iowa and did this, and they felt like, man, nobody helped me. And I guess because I did see this, the people that kept open thrived. The other guys vanished. Yeah. And you know what? Oh, I feel sorry for them. And I tell people this. Maybe I'm wrong. I say, no, they were weeded out. God, it's sheep and goats time. It's wheat and tares. Yeah. These churches said, we're not essential. And you know what the people that went to that church said? I agree.
Turns out you're right.
And then they showed up to your guys' somebody's going to be a hero when we need it. Somebody's going to be courageous. Somebody's going to tell me that there is a sanctuary left on this earth that I can go to when I'm in fear. Because had we said, you got to come to church, you're going to hell. No. Somebody said, you can't wear a mask. No. Do whatever you need to do. But we're open if you need us. That was the church historically. Yeah. Talk to a pastor who right now needs, and I'll bet you this is more so, the guy that shut down and now regrets it and said, God, I betrayed you. Yeah. I've heard the cock crow 3 times. Yeah. Tell him how to move forward, and as a pastor to pastor, in a language that can help him move into the next realm, and what should be expected of him now to take his church to the next season.
Well, I would start by saying my email is one of the worst kept secrets in the world. And if you are either one of those categories, conduitchurch.com, you can find me, and I would be glad to talk to you, because if you're somebody that shut down and you regret it, you're not alone. And I would go so far as to say that for the most part, the pastors that I know that regretted it, like, it wasn't your specialty. It wasn't, there might have been something you thought was obvious that, now, but in hindsight, at the time, none of it was obvious. And, if I'm sitting where you're sitting, here's what I know. Talking about it out loud feels really scary, but talking about it out loud was exactly what I needed to do in March and April of 2020. And what people just need to hear right now is, hey, this is what's true. And I think there's even more credibility from someone that says, I got it wrong, and now I want to get it right. Because I remember sitting with our executive pastor going, man, if we're wrong about this, I'm going to be fired, and I should be, by reopening. If I was wrong, and these numbers were wrong, then I made a mistake that was going to cost people's lives, then I should be fired. And the reverse is, if you shut down and now your people don't trust you, one of the best ways to get people to trust you is just to tell them the truth and admit it. And for those that you are out there that have felt alone, that, because I do remember that. I remember thinking, am I the only guy? Like, I would talk to my wife, sometimes at night going, I'm pretty sure I'm right, but if I'm wrong, I really want to know, because it felt really lonely in those days. And again, 2 Timothy 4, Paul, when he's telling Timothy, everybody deserted me, and then he names a couple of them. Onesiphorus, he didn't abandon me, and he said, hey, send Luke, tell him to bring my things, bring my cloak and my paper, and so we could continue to write. But he felt alone, and the reason is that I just think it's the price of leadership. The cost of leadership is being misunderstood. And those that, the history is replete with people that made decisions that in hindsight looked obvious and were right, but in the moment, everybody thought they were crazy. And the truth is that Paul might have been alone in a jail cell in Rome, but man, Peter was still running around. There was a thriving, exploding church that was growing all over the world. So he might have felt alone geographically, but he wasn't alone. It's like Elijah, by the way, Elijah, there are 700 that haven't bowed. And, for us that we're in that, because I remember thinking that actually, and maybe I'll just say this and I'll be done, but I felt like God was kind of convicting me because I was having an Elijah complex. There's nobody holy but me. So I'm just going to take my toys and go home. And God basically telling him, hey, get off your butt, suck it up, and get back out there. And by the way, you're not alone. Tons of people haven't bowed. And so a little bit of that, if you're feeling it, you got to shake it off. You got to shake it off because the world needs you, needs me, needs Brad, needs us to, what Paul said, don't be ashamed of the gospel. Don't withdraw. Don't abandon it. Don't be ashamed. Because what you end up doing, what I find half my job is, it seems like right now, is to say something out loud that everybody else has been thinking, but is scared to say because, in John 7, when Jesus, it says that the people wanted to say something about him, but they were afraid of their leaders. They were silenced. When you say that, when Jesus would say it out loud, you say it out loud, you're giving someone else just a gift that, hey, I'm not alone either. Because if you're feeling alone, your people in your church are really, really feeling alone.
And there is redemption and forgiveness, and they didn't do anything wrong if you were trying to hear from God. And lastly, tell to the church in America, and that's any believer, and tell them what is, I believe, is a new dimension of what will be expected of Christians in America from this day forward. It is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And it's a third great awakening. So explain to the believers as a pastor what you think has been missing and what will be expected of us in the future to be able to withstand and be the Christ followers in the United States.
Yeah.
God bless you folks for watching. God bless you, Darren. Man, you're such a great pastor. It's a lot of fun. We'll do it again if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And this is just the first of this series of what it looks to be a word pastor. And I hope to inspire all of you who are believers. And if you're not a believer, you're going to be, because this is where the truth is. And for those things you're searching for, I've got your answers. Happens to be through the God that for some reason allowed me to join the club. So, man, trust me when I tell you,
there is a God.
Yeah, there is indeed. God bless you guys. Thank you for coming. This is God's Comic. Brad Stine. Remember, PC free is liberty. And I'm just a regular guy, but I am an American. I am a patriot. I am a Christ follower first. And all I'm doing is putting the woke back to sleep.